He had no suit, no name on the list, but something that made the ultra-rich fall silent and lower their heads. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from today. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. A champagne flute crashed to the deck, the glass exploding into silence. The laughter stopped mid-breath. Conversations died on tongues. Heads turned toward the commotion near the entry ramp, where a uniformed security guard stood gripping the front of an older man's jacket. The man's boots were dusty. His duffel bag was worn at the edges. His face, lined but unshaken, met the fury in front of him with a calm that unnerved everyone watching. "I told you," the guard barked, voice sharp enough to pierce the ocean breeze. "Deliveries go through the kitchen entrance. You see that sign?" No one spoke. Not the server who'd been passing, hors d'oeuvres. Not the couple who just arrived in matching white linen. Not the influencer with her phone still hovering mid-Instagram story. The older man didn't flinch. He didn't yell. He simply lowered his eyes for half a second, not in submission, but in quiet restraint, then gently removed the guard's hand from his jacket. His voice never came. From somewhere up on the deck, someone let out a nervous chuckle. Then another. It spread, thin and ugly like a stain. The kind of laugh people use when they're not sure whether to join in or step away. When someone falls, or cries in public, or bleeds. The man stood where he was, surrounded by sunlight, sea spray and judgment. He looked out across the water, not at the crowd, not at the ones watching, just past it all. His breathing was steady, eyes narrowed slightly against the glare. One could almost believe he wasn't humiliated, if not for the way his shoulders had stiffened, like they were holding something heavier than the bag on his back. "Maybe he's lost," someone whispered. "Or senile," another replied. "I think I saw him by the service trucks earlier." The receptionist, now flustered, adjusted her badge and tried to reassert control. "Sir, this is a private event. For confirmed guests only." Still, he said nothing. Still, he stood there, utterly unmoved. A woman in a backless gold gown leaned toward her partner and muttered, "I thought these cruises were exclusive." The man beside her shrugged, sipping his drink. You can't control who sneaks through the cracks. Down on the dock, a breeze picked up. It caught the edge of the man's faded army jacket and fluttered it open just enough to reveal something stitched near the collar, a patch long, faded but unmistakable. California Governor's seal. No one noticed. Or maybe they saw and didn't understand. A valet called out numbers. More guests arrived in sleek cars and sharper egos. Someone tossed a joke that didn't land. The security guard adjusted his collar, suddenly aware of how many people had witnessed the scene. The older man stepped aside. No protest. No explanation. He stood behind a velvet rope like luggage left unattended and watched the sunlight dance on the waves. And in that pause, that quiet, heavy pause, the noise resumed, not because the moment had passed, but because no one knew what else to do. He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't made a scene, but his silence had done something worse. It had held up a mirror. A teenage crew member walked by with a tray of lemon water. She hesitated, glanced at him, then looked away quickly. Guilt flashed across her face like a shadow. But she didn't stop. No one ever stops. The man looked down at the shattered champagne glass near his feet. A fragment of it caught the light like a blade. He could have stepped over it, could have walked away. Instead, he knelt with rough hands and careful fingers. He began to gather the shards. Behind him, the crowd had already moved on. Drinks refilled, music resumed. But somewhere in a far corner of the upper deck, one man was still watching. His smile fading, his fingers tightening around the stem of his own untouched glass. No one asked the older man why he was there. No one dared. And as he rose slowly, glass in hand, and placed it on the nearest tray, a single sentence seemed to echo louder than the commotion ever had, though he hadn't spoken aloud. Sometimes the loudest thing in a room is the person who doesn't fight back. The midday sun shimmered against glass railings and champagne flutes, casting sharp reflections across the upper deck. Everything gleamed. The water, the shoes, the smiles. It was a kind of curated luxury that whispered its worth through scent, stitching, and silence. Arnold sat alone on a bench near the outer edge of the promenade, where the breeze was stronger and fewer eyes lingered long. His jacket, faded, creased, but clean, hung open just enough to reveal a plain gray t-shirt. His fingers unwrapped a small foil packet. Inside, a dry sandwich. Homemade, no doubt. The bread was slightly flattened, as it had traveled too far in a duffel bag that knew other countries. He took a bite without looking up, chewed slowly. The noise of silverware clinking on fine china filled the air behind him. Laughter bloomed in bursts, cultivated, deliberate, just loud enough to prove presence. A young couple walked by in designer activewear. The woman slowed her step. "Is he with the staff?" She whispered. The man smirked. "Doesn't look polished enough for that." They kept walking. But not before she snapped a photo, angled just so, cropping the background, and typed something under her breath. "Luxury life meets garbage chic," she murmured. Hashtag, emoji, post. Two men in pastel polos and white shoes strolled past next. "Check it out," one muttered. "Every luxury yacht needs a mascot." His friend chuckled. "Or a moral lesson." Arnold didn't react. He finished the sandwich, folded the foil carefully, and slipped it back into his pocket. From behind mirrored sunglasses, he glanced toward the horizon. The sea remained the only thing here not trying to prove anything. But the deck wasn't done with him yet. A waiter, arms full of glassware, misstepped. A flute tumbled off his tray, shattered near Arnold's feet. Instantly, Arnold crouched, gathering the larger shards before someone got hurt. He held one piece like it might still hold its shape if he were gentle enough. The waiter blushed. "Thank you, sir." Arnold nodded once. No words. That's when she arrived. Tall, bronze, wrapped in a silk dress that shifted with every breath. The kind of woman who didn't walk so much as glide, practiced over years of making entrances. She moved quickly across the deck, then, too quickly, her heel caught on the plank beside Arnold's seat. The wine glass in her hand tilted and spilled. A splash of crimson soaked into Arnold's shoulder and across his chest. It bled like a wound against a gray fabric. She gasped theatrically, then smiled just wide enough for the nearby onlookers to catch it. "Oh, dear," she said, pressing a manicured hand to her chest. "Now you look like you belong in the engine room." A few chuckles flickered through the crowd. Nervous, complicit, Arnold slowly stood. He looked at the stain, then at her, not accusing, not pleading, just looking. The woman's smile faltered, only slightly, but enough. Without a word, Arnold pulled a cloth from his back pocket, the same one he used to wipe his hands after lunch, and dabbed at the stain, carefully, methodically, as if tending to someone else's wound. He nodded to the woman, just once, and turned to leave. She called after him, half laughing, "It was just a joke, sir." Arnold didn't respond, but the silence he left behind carried more weight than any insult she had intended. By the time he disappeared down the steps toward the lower deck, several heads had turned, not toward him, but toward each other, as if, for the first time, they weren't sure who had embarrassed whom. The brunch was elegant by design. Crystal glasses refracted soft morning light. Butter swans melted over imported croissants. The white linen tables formed a grid of quiet power, occupied by venture capitalists, art collectors, and women in gowns that cost more than most wedding rings. It was a curated kind of serenity, meant to look effortless, but choreographed down to the last raspberry coulis swirl. Arnold sat alone at a table near the railing. His plate was simple: a boiled egg, 2 slices of toast, a handful of grapes he'd picked carefully from a central platter. He ate slowly, methodically, like someone who respected the time it took to prepare a meal. He didn't belong. At least, not in the eyes that kept drifting toward him. Benton Vale saw him too. He'd seen him since day one, the man in the faded jacket, sitting quietly, eating like he'd paid for his own ticket. It itched at him. The silence. The way no one seemed to know who this man was. Or worse, that no one had the courage to ask. It wasn't just annoyance. It was disruption. And today, Benton had chosen not to ignore it. He rose from his seat, napkin in hand, and strolled toward Arnold's table with a rehearsed ease. The kind of stride you develop after years of being clapped for before saying anything. Around him, the conversation dimmed, just slightly. Enough. He stopped 2 steps from the edge of Arnold's table and tilted his head. "Morning," Benton said, voice oozing with the kind of friendliness that begged for confrontation. "I wasn't aware we were doing open seating today." Arnold looked up, calmly, finished chewing, placed his fork down. Benton continued, louder this time. "I just thought, with the wait list and all, someone must have invited you. Or do we just pick our own spots now?" A few at nearby tables chuckled nervously. No one intervened. Arnold didn't speak. He reached for his water, took a slow sip. Benton smiled, then turned slightly to make sure others were watching. "Don't get me wrong," he said, gesturing to Arnold's plate. "The egg looks great. Classic. And hey, I respect the hustle. Motivation, resilience, grit, very Instagrammable." Louder now. His words began to spill like champagne, just past the rim. "But here's the thing we call for brunch, not a midlife crisis mascot. So unless you're here to inspire a podcast episode, I kindly suggest you give the table back to someone who belongs at it." A beat passed, then another. Arnold didn't rise. He didn't react. He simply set down his glass and looked Benton in the eyes. Then, with a voice steady enough to slice steel, he replied, "It's interesting how the person who was given a seat is the least polite one at the table." The words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. They landed like a crack in glass, too soft to shatter, but deep enough to never forget. Benton blinked, a small twitch in his cheek. His lips curled slightly, but no comeback came. Just air. The moment stretched, taut and uncomfortable. A waiter approached with a tray of drinks, sensed attention, and averted course. One of the women at a nearby table, the same one who had posted a story about Arnold the day before, now lowered her sunglasses, just enough to see more clearly. Arnold reached for a paper napkin, wiped the corner of his mouth, and stood, not in defiance, not in retreat, just decisively. He picked up his plate, turned, and walked toward the railing. As he left, someone at Benton's table leaned over and whispered, not quietly enough, "Who is he?" Benton said nothing, but the question lingered longer than any insult. Arnold reached the edge of the deck, finished his toast with his back to the crowd, and let the wind carry the last crumbs away over the sea. No one applauded. No one spoke. But something subtle, invisible had shifted. It wasn't power. It was presence. And presence doesn't beg for approval. It simply stays. The ballroom pulsed with low jazz and higher egos. Chandeliers floated like glass crowns above a sea of tailored tuxedos, silk gowns, and watch faces that shimmered with 6 figures of silent power. Laughter moved in curated waves, punctuated by toasts that felt more rehearsed than spontaneous. At the center of it all stood Benton Vale, arms crossed, wine glass poised just above his smirk. He was in his element, a self-appointed king among peacocks. The night had one final act. The crew's director, elegant in black and gold, stepped onto the stage at the far end of the ballroom. Her heels clicked softly, then stopped. She took a breath and tapped the microphone. The music dimmed. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, smiling as if nothing in the world could go wrong. "Before we begin the charity auction, we have a special announcement." The murmuring dipped. Forks were set down. One man whispered, "This must be the mystery donor." The director continued, "Over the past 3 days, we've celebrated the beauty of generosity, luxury, and community. But there's someone here tonight whose contribution, both financial and personal, has made all of this possible." The room shifted. She let the silence breathe. "This voyage," she said, "was made possible by an anonymous donor who contributed $3 million to our pediatric cancer fund. Quietly, without request for recognition or reward." Benton rolled his eyes. "Oh, come on," he muttered under his breath, swirling his drink. "And tonight," the director said, "he's allowed us to share his name." A pause. A single name. Mr. Arnold Schwarzenegger. It hit like a thunderclap. Chairs creaked. Glasses were frozen midair. One woman audibly gasped. Another blinked so hard her false lashes shifted. Arnold stepped forward from the edge of the ballroom. No tuxedo, no champagne, no entourage. The same jacket, the same boots, the same silence. But everything had changed. He walked up the steps calmly, like a man who climbed greater mountains with heavier burdens. When he reached the podium, he didn't adjust the mic, didn't clear his throat, just looked at them. And they looked back, some confused, some ashamed, some finally seeing him for the very first time. He began. When I was 19, I slept on the floor of a gym in Los Angeles. The room smelled like sweat and hope. I used a rolled-up sweatshirt as a pillow. My meals were eggs and bread. Some days, just bread. No one moved. No one asked me where I came from, only why I talked funny, or why my arms looked like they didn't belong on my body. I was called a freak, an immigrant, a joke with muscles. A few guests shifted in their seats. I cleaned toilets between workouts. I smiled when people laughed at me, because I thought that was the price of becoming something. I told myself one day they won't laugh. His voice didn't waver. It didn't rise, but it carried. I didn't donate $3 million so my name could be read aloud, he continued. I did it because I remember what it's like to feel invisible. And I wanted children fighting for their lives to never feel that way. A beat. He scanned the room. The exact faces it had hours ago, laughed at his clothes, doubted his presence, ignored his silence. But I also came here, he said, slower now, to observe. He let that word settle. To see how people behave when there are no cameras, no microphones, no audience to impress. Just one man sitting in the wrong chair, wearing the wrong jacket. A flush of shame moved like a ripple across the room. 3 days, he said. That's all it took for some of you to reveal exactly who you are. Benton shifted uncomfortably. The hand holding his wine glass now trembled just a little. I've played heroes in movies, Arnold said, eyes still steady. But I never needed a script to recognize dignity. You don't earn it with a watch, or a yacht, or the number of people who clap when you speak. Another pause. I didn't need your wine. I didn't need your table. I just wanted to know, if I were nobody, would you still see me as human? He turned slightly, as if glancing beyond the ballroom walls, to something deeper, maybe younger, maybe older. Some of you failed that test. Dead silence. Then gently. But I hope you forgive yourselves faster than you judged me. Arnold stepped back from the mic. The applause didn't come. Not yet. Not because he didn't deserve it, but because no one knew how to clap with shame in their hands. He gave the room one last look, not angry, not smug, just finished. And then, without waiting for thanks, he stepped off the stage. Behind him, the microphone buzzed softly in the silence, and no one dared fill it. The ballroom no longer shimmered. It still sparkled, yes. Chandeliers still hung like glittering ghosts, and glasses were still full, but something beneath the surface had fractured. The applause had never come. Only murmurs, swallowed too late. Only shifting glances and tight throats. Benton Vale stood frozen near the rear exit, jaw clenched, the corners of his mouth twitching in a war between performance and panic. His grip on the wine glass he hadn't sipped from all evening had turned white-knuckled. He moved quickly now, not with the same controlled swagger as before, but with the urgency of a man trying to escape the gravity of his own name, toward the hallway, away from the stairs. He nearly reached the door. "Excuse me," a voice said, soft but firm. Benton turned. It was an older man, not one of the usual players, modestly dressed. A tech consultant, maybe, or a quiet donor. Someone invisible until this very moment. The man tilted his head. "You're Benton Vale, right?" Benton nodded, already shifting his weight to leave. The man didn't move. He stepped in just slightly. "So, you're the guy who spent 3 days mocking the person who paid for this entire voyage?" The words weren't loud, but they hit like a bell in a library. Several nearby guests paused mid-conversation. One woman lowered her champagne flute mid-sip. A ripple spread, subtle, damning. Benton tried to smile. "That's a gross exaggeration." "You told him to stay in his lane," the man replied, still soft. "Turns out he built the road." Benton's mouth opened. then closed. The man stepped aside. "No worries," he said. "It's just that now everyone knows." Benton pushed past him and kept walking. But the hallway was longer than it had been moments ago, and colder. Near the end, he passed a group of junior staff clustered around the phone. They didn't look up, but the video playing on screen was unmistakable. A still of Arnold sitting alone, overlaid with the words motivation or maintenance. Benton's own voice echoed from the audio. Laughter followed. The clip had been uploaded less than 20 minutes ago. It was already trending. He ducked into the bar. Empty, dimly lit, no music, just a quiet hum of embarrassment. He slumped into a corner booth and finally exhaled. The sound that came out was unfamiliar, hollow, almost human. On the table, next to a fresh napkin and untouched drink, sat a single folded slip of paper. Neat, precise, white against polished mahogany. He stared at it for a while, then picked it up. The handwriting was clean, firm, the ink pressed into the paper like it meant to stay. Some men wear suits like armor. You wear yours like a mask. And now that it's off, there's nothing underneath. No name, no initials, no need. He crushed the paper slowly, as if by folding it tightly enough, he could undo what had been written. But the words had already carved their place. In the room, in the night, in him. Outside the glass window, a few guests were gathered on the terrace. Not laughing now, just watching the sea. Some alone, some holding glasses they didn't sip from. One woman, who had giggled at his jokes just hours ago, now avoided his gaze completely. She reached for her phone and began deleting stories. Stories where Benton had been tagged, laughed with, toasted beside. She didn't say goodbye. She just walked away. Later that night, the cruise director would announce a change in the gala program. Mr. Bentonville's scheduled keynote had been removed in consideration of recent developments. No one asked why. No one questioned it. Back in his suite, Ben would sit in silence. The notifications wouldn't stop. Mentions, headlines, comment threads with words like coward, arrogant, expose. And somewhere on the lower deck, Arnold Schwarzenegger would stand quietly near the railing, the moon above, the sea below, his breath steady, his face unreadable. He hadn't needed to humiliate anyone. He'd simply told the truth, and watched what broke under its weight. The hallway near the lower deck kitchen was quiet, save for the soft clatter of dishes and the muffled hum of the engine. It was a part of the yacht no influencer ever posted about. Narrow, dim, practical. Here, uniforms replaced tuxedos. Aprons instead of gowns, names embroidered in thread, not etched on nameplates. Arnold stood by the open door leading to the outer corridor, his frame silhouetted against the twilight. The sea was calmer now, the air cooler. In his hand, a plain ceramic mug, coffee, likely cold. He wasn't looking at anything in particular, just breathing slowly, as if the silence was something worth honoring. Footsteps approached, cautious, light hesitant. "Mr. Schwarzenegger?" a voice said. Arnold turned slightly. Not startled, just attentive. It was a young server, the same boy who'd watched attention unfold from a distance 3 nights in a row. Barely 20. Namatak hooked. Shoulders tense, like he wasn't sure if this was allowed. I hope I'm not interrupting," the boy said. "You're not," Arnold replied, his voice quiet, steady. The boy stepped forward, then stopped just short of standing beside him. "I've been working these cruises for over a year," he began. "Most guests don't remember your face. They remember your tray, how quickly you refill, how quietly you disappear." Arnold listened. No rush, no assumptions. But this week, the boy said, "I saw how they looked at you, like you didn't belong, like you weren't even real. A breath, not shaky, but honest. And then, tonight, I saw who you actually are. And he paused. "I want to be like you." Arnold finally turned to him. The boy clarified quickly, "Not like the bodybuilder, not the action star." He looked down, embarrassed. "I mean the kind of man who stands in a room full of people judging him and doesn't shrink." Silence. Then, I want to be strong like that. Arnold's gaze softened. He didn't smile right away. Instead, he studied the boy the way a sculptor studies raw marble, not a judge, but to understand where the lines already are. You already are, he said. The boy blinked. What? Arnold set the mug down on a nearby ledge. Courage, he said, isn't something you earn by waiting for the right moment. It's what you choose in the small ones. The boy nodded slowly, absorbing it like sunlight. Arnold continued. Start by helping people who fall, even when no one's looking, especially then. That landed. The boy straightened his back without realizing. Arnold placed a hand on his shoulder, firm, reassuring. You don't need cameras to be the kind of man others remember, he said. Just consistency. And spine. The boy exhaled. Something unspoken left his chest. Thank you, he whispered. Arnold nodded once. Now go finish your shift. Make it your best one. The boy smiled, small but real, and walked away, shoulders higher than when he came. Arnold turned back toward the sea. Behind him, inside the crew hallway, the sound of plates continued. Service resumed. The world moved on. But for one young man, and perhaps more who would never say it out loud, something had changed. Not through speeches, not through power, but through presence, through the kind of quiet strength that doesn't need applause or echo. The tender boat rocked gently as it pulled away from the yacht, its engine barely louder than the early morning tide. The sun was just rising, soft gold streaks stretching across a sea that now looked quieter, almost reverent. From the upper deck, a few passengers stood at the railings, not to wave, not to gossip, but simply to watch. Arnold stood near the bow of the small vessel, hands in his pockets, back straight. He didn't glance back at the Elysian majesty. Not once. His gaze remained forward, fixed on the distant curve of the harbor ahead. Calm, resolute. It was the same posture, the same jacket, the same silence. But everything was different now. No guard barked orders. No whispers snuck past lips. No laughter echoed in his direction. Only the wind, only the water, and a kind of collective stillness, as if those left behind knew, deep down, they would never see the world the same again. The camera lingered on that final image. Arnold against the morning light, slowly receding from the ship that had, only days earlier, tried to erase him. Then a cut, interior, the ballroom, empty now, save for a few tired staff folding chairs and resetting silverware for the next wave of events no one would attend with the same bravado. At the podium, the crew's director adjusted the mic. Her voice was softer than before, not for effect, but because the moment called for something less than grandeur. We found this message left on the desk in Mr. Schwarzenegger's suite, she said. He asked that we share it with the guests if it felt appropriate. She unfolded the note. Her fingers trembled slightly, but she kept her eyes on the words. When people forget who you are, let your actions remind them. No applause followed, just a subtle tightening of throats, the unspoken questions, the reflection that arrives when a mask slips and a mirror remains. A soft piano melody began to play, not from the speakers, but from the lounge below, where a live musician had resumed his set. The notes floated upward, weightless. Cut again. Now, the crew hallway. The same corridor from Chapter 6. But this time, the young server walked with quiet confidence, no longer hugging the wall. In his arms, he gently steadied an elderly guest who had stumbled near the steps. No cameras, no audience, just instinct. He smiled as he helped the man to his seat. Behind him, one of the veteran waiters looked on and nodded, approval without words. The boy didn't notice. He wasn't performing. He was becoming. Cut again. Exterior. The dock. The tender touch shore. Arnold stepped out, boots hitting the wooden planks with familiar weight. Still no words. Still no crowd. But from the end of the dock, just visible in the light, stood a young girl with her father pointing toward him. Is that the man from the story? She whispered. The father nodded. Quietly, Arnold walked past them, offering a small nod. The child's eyes widened, not in awe, but in recognition, as if she somehow understood that greatness doesn't have to be loud. Final cut. A wide shot. The Elysium majesty now far in the distance, growing smaller against the open water. But the camera lingers not on the ship, not on its decadence or its guests, but on the space left behind in Arnold's absence. A void shaped not by what he said, but by what he refused to become. Then, gently, a voiceover, anonymous, reflective. Sometimes the people we try hardest to ignore are the ones who end up showing us who we really are. Fade to black. No music, just silence, and the echo of everything unsaid.